How many of you work in recruitment or HR?
Yeah, I do.
One.
Same, I do.
Two.
Me too.
Three.
I do as well.
Four. Dan, I don't think you do you?
I'm not HR, but I am currently recruiting.
Okay, but you're a hiring manager. I just took a quick look at your profile.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. Right. Well, look, I'm gonna go through a presentation I gave at the Sourcing Summit in Amsterdam a couple of years ago. I haven't done this talk since then, so bear with me if I'm a little bit clunky. It should only take about 15 minutes. What I'd like you to do is, if there's anything that I say that you either don't understand or you don't agree with, or you're confused by in any way, just if you can just make a note of it and then ask questions at the end. But it could get messy if I try and answer the questions as we go through it. Anyone have any questions right now before we get going? No? Okay. Right. Can everyone see my shared screen?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Right. Okay. The topic is specifically to give you all a little bit more insight into the art and science of persuasion in respect of attracting people to jobs. As I said, this talk was originally given to an auditorium full of people whose specific job was to source candidates. But what I'm going to talk about here is applicable to almost anybody who's ever charged with the responsibility of having to find people who may be suitable for a job that they're trying to fill. So let's get going. Right, so look, my name's Mitch Sullivan. I've been in the UK now most of my life. I lived in Switzerland for quite a while. I've been in recruitment for over 30 years. As you can see, I call myself the world's 51st best recruitment blogger. And perhaps I'll explain why I do that. Whenever I see those sort of lists that come out normally at the end of each year, the top 50 HR recruitment bloggers to follow, I'm never in them. So I just assume that I missed the cut by one, hence that I'm the 51st best. But I use that headline on LinkedIn because I'm trying to be funny. I'm also trying to be modest, partly because I actually think I'm one of the best rather than the 51st, but that's another discussion. But some people get the joke, particularly those who kind of know me or read my blogs over the last sort of 7 or 8 years. And other people think I'm bragging. But either of those reactions is good because it helps get me noticed and or remembered. And that's really pretty much one of the themes of what we're going to talk about today. So let's get started. So what I'm going to try and do here today is appeal to your logic rather than throw lots of data at you. There is relatively very little data when it comes to recruitment activity, partly because recruiters don't measure very much, and partly because those that do don't want to share it and give away what they perceive to be competitive advantage. So I'm going to share with you some of my experiences to illustrate some of my points, but like I said, mostly I'll be appealing to your sense of logic. Particularly logic that's surrounded by how people think and act before they contemplate entering a recruitment process. Particularly as most people don't enjoy the recruitment process, particularly the most arduous of conversations, which is the job interview. So I'm essentially sort of arguing that people have to have good reason to want to show some interest in a job that may be better than the one that they're doing. So in the internet age, finding people has become increasingly easy to do. A lot of recruiters rely on LinkedIn. There are a lot of people on LinkedIn, particularly in certain sort of job disciplines. But when I first came into recruitment all those years ago, gathering information on potential candidates took forever. It took weeks and weeks. Took lots of phone calls, lots of pretending to be someone else to get the information that we needed so that we could start targeting people that we wanted to pitch jobs to. So like I said, finding people is relatively easy. If you're determined enough, you can pretty much find information about almost anybody online, over and above LinkedIn. However, what still is just as difficult as it always has been is persuading people to do something. And it's probably harder now than it was before, if only because people are much easier to find. They get bombarded with recruiting messages far more regularly. And nearly all of those recruitment messages are bad in ways that I'm going to illustrate to you in a short while. But it's become very easy for people to get jaded when presented with information about a job. So how do we persuade people to show some interest in jobs that we're trying to fill and to take some kind of action? Generally, there's always been a trend for recruiters to try and attract people to jobs by telling them how great the hiring company is. And that's probably because that kind of information is actually much easier to get, whether, either they'll get it from the website or they'll be repeating what HR or the line manager told them when they took the job brief. And often it's just something that's written at the top of a job description. But normally it's very company centric. So it's something about the company that they believe will be the most attractive feature for somebody to want to respond to that job. The problem with that, of course, is that everybody starts to sound the same. So I'm going to show you a few real openings to real job ads, and you'll notice there's something very similar about all of them. All of them are about the company and who they are and what they do. And for most people, that isn't the question that they need an answer to before they apply to a job. And what most people want an answer to is this question, is what's in it for me? How might my life be better if I were going to be doing this job as opposed to the one that I'm currently doing? So in other words, it's the concept of self-interest. Most of us in many scenarios in life are driven by our own best interest. Self-interest is a notion that was first introduced by Adam Smith, who was the whose name is linked to the Adam Smith Institute, which I think is the biggest sort of liberal think tank certainly in the UK, if not the world. His famous book was called The Wealth of Nations, and in it he described self-interest as the invisible hand that guides the economy, meaning that if in business people pursued their own best interest, that would allow them to sell more stuff, which in turn would benefit others in the supply chain. Now, we're in an age of, or have been in an age of hyper-capitalism, and the extent of this argument may be questioned because it can be taken too far, but the fundamentals are true. And that if we assume that people are playing the business game at least semi-fairly. So rational self-interest is essentially when people select alternatives they perceive to be in their best interest, but as I said, not to be confused with being selfish. So what are these important things that in jobs that most people are attracted to? So of all of the people that are involved in the recruitment process, these are the four key entities: the company, the recruiter, the hiring manager, and the candidate. And I'm arguing that by far and away the most important entity in this equation is the candidate, particularly at this stage of the recruitment process. So when it comes to changing jobs, candidates, as I said, are primarily interested in themselves. And like I said, they're no different to me and you. So what does that look like? About 5 years ago, I read an article by this chap, a recruiter called Jan Tegzer. He's based in the Czech Republic, and he wrote an article called "The 7 Most Popular Reasons Why People Leave Jobs." I'll actually send each of you a link to the article at the end so that you can go and take a look at it yourself. But what drew me to this article when I first saw it was, Jan is a recruiter, has been in recruitment a long time. And he conducted this study of which the results bore many similarities to many other research studies that I'd seen around workplace motivation or work-related or job-seeking motivation. But what particularly appealed to me in this was that it had a lot of integrity, because Jan conducted this study over a 10-year period. So essentially, during the course of him doing his job, every single time he had a conversation with a candidate about a job, he would ask them a variation of the following question. What is it about your current job that you'd like to get away from? Or what is your current job not giving you that you would like your next job to have? He spoke to around 8,600 or so people, candidates, across a wide range of job disciplines, from sales to accounting to tech. I think tech was the biggest single category. And the 7 that in his study that were the most popular were the lack of opportunities to use skills, the boss or management, the culture of the company, the prospects for promotion, either having too much or too little work to do, and then 6th and 7th were salary and benefits. Money and compensation often confuses people. A lot of people tend to think that money and benefits are the most important consideration when somebody's changing jobs. Well, it actually isn't. In all of the studies I've seen, it normally comes at least 5th, 6th or 7th. Where people get confused with compensation is that money generally comes top on the list of demotivators as opposed to motivators to leave if they perceive themselves to be underpaid. So that's where the confusion comes. But by far and away, the biggest single category that drives people's motivation to want to change jobs is the prospect of becoming a better version of themselves. So professional development, there being more opportunities for learning, working with to people that are more talented than them, maybe having a great boss who's good at mentoring. Maybe the challenge of the job is bigger, which by default means that they'll learn more because they'll have to prove themselves across a different range of challenges. But there are many. I mean, I did a count up a few months ago, and there's almost 100 if you start breaking them down into subcategories. A lot will depend in terms of a person's motivation to want to respond to a job ad, is if they're either passive or active. Most of you will know, it's a bit of a cliche, but the fundamental difference between a passive candidate and an active candidate is an active candidate is someone who needs another job, either because they're unemployed or they're in a job that they hate. And a passive candidate is somebody who could be tempted by moving on to another company or to another job if that job looks like it's going to improve their professional life in some way. Now, some passive candidates will look at job ads. According to a study that I read a couple of years ago, there was a recruitment marketing company based in Dublin called Clinch. And according to their statistics, over 60% of all job board traffic is from people who are in a job and potentially looking for something that might improve their situation. The other factor that's become more prevalent in recent years is the disruptive nature of social media. A lot of people will see a job ad for the first time on social media at a time when they weren't particularly browsing jobs or decided to put a keyword search into one of their favorite job boards. And that in and of itself can be enough to make somebody stop, read the opening line, be intrigued, and click it to expand it to see what else it contains. So fundamentally, I would argue that anyone who needs another job or is in a job that they hate is probably actively looking, is probably putting keyword searches into places like, you know, the job boards and or LinkedIn or Google. And they are relatively easy to attract to most jobs if you consider that there's going to be enough of those types of people currently available, which, you know, we could argue that perhaps at the moment in a lot of jobs there are a lot more capable and talented people available right now than there were 3 or 4 months ago. But that's going to come back fairly soon. So I'm going to show you some examples. Here's a message that I got from somebody a few months back trying to pitch a job to me working for a recruitment agency. Apart from the fact he hadn't done his research, and if he had, he would never have approached me to work as a recruiter in a recruitment agency. But if you'll notice from the message, it's all about him and what he wants, rather than it being about me and what I might want. So he tells me about his client, who they are, where they are. They've got a really great offer, but he doesn't tell me what that offer is or give me any clues as to what it might be. They've got an active client base. I'd really like to talk to you. It's all very sort of centered around the needs of the hiring company and or the recruiter. And anyone who doesn't need another job, and I fell into that category when I received the email, is just going to ignore it. Because there's nothing there that's going to tempt them to want to at least be a little bit curious and to find out more. How to attract the best candidates. My first piece of advice is first you need to assess the vacancy and work out whether you think there is a large enough candidate audience to simply just play the numbers game, which is to put your ad out or your job posting out enough times in enough of the right kind of places for enough of the people who are going to be available to see it so that they can respond. But if it's for a job that is traditionally hard to fill, or for a job that even under the current circumstances is still going to be difficult to fill because not that many of those types of people have been made redundant, then you're probably going to have to do a lot more work to find out how you're going to sell that job, which means understanding more about why that job might appeal to somebody. And normally that involves asking questions of the hiring manager, like, why would somebody who can do this job and is currently doing a job similar to this one leave their company to come and work for you? And I've asked that question to hundreds and hundreds of hiring managers and HR people. And probably around 50% of the time when I ask that question, because they've never been asked it before, they look at me like a dog that's just been shown a card trick, somewhat mystified. And I explain, look, if we're going to have to sell this job, then we need to give people reasons to, first of all, notice the ad. Then we need to get them to read it and then read to the end. And then if we get them to read to the end of the ad, then there's statistically a much higher chance of them actually responding in some way, be that send you an email, drop you a message on LinkedIn, phone you, or actually make a formal application. So crafting the right message is important, but it's absolutely critical that the ad starts the process of answering the following question, which is often in the minds of most of the best candidates, which is, why might my life be more rewarding if I were to do this job? So, and the best way to make that point, and this is a classic mistake I see many recruiters make, is they'll start their ad by talking about the company and how great the company thinks they are, and the fact that they're award-winning, or they're a market leader, or they've just opened a new office, or they turn over X, Y, Z. And then at the end of the ad, and then what follows is normally a list of what they were doing, tasks, responsibilities, then a laundry list of demands and qualifications. And then sometimes at the end of the ad, there's a subsection that says, what's in it for you? And then they list all of the benefits. And logically, that section needs to be at the top of the ad, because most people are most interested in what's in it for them before they're going to start being concerned about who the company is, what their stature is, whether they're going to be the type of company they might want to work for. I'm going to share with you some a little bit more information on some empirical evidence that was put together by 3 university lecturers from, what were they called? Vermont, Saskatchewan, and Calgary. And they got together and they did a study that effectively looked at the effect that the type of language that job ads used, the effect that it has on the quality of responses. So they had a target. The subject of the study was a large Canadian engineering firm. They ran 56 job ads. They split test those 56 ads. So they were all ads for permanent roles, for production manager jobs, engineering manager jobs, project management roles, all paying roughly between 40 and 80K in sterling. Jobs that were traditionally not that easy to fill. The split test involved them running the ads in the same way the company had always run their job ads, which were very company centric. So the ads were all about the company and what they wanted, what the job involved, and what the candidate would need to bring in order to get the job. And then the other 28 adverts, they changed the language so that they made it more candidate centric. So what that meant is that they would use language that they described as more support language. So it, rather than saying, you must have X, Y, and Z, it would say you'll be supported in your efforts to become or to learn more about. Essentially, they repositioned the way they talked about the job so that it reflected the self-interest of the reader rather than the self-interest of the hiring company. I'm also going to include a link where you can read more about this study at the end as well. But the study yielded a total number of job applications of 991. All of the hiring managers and the research people studied the responses and matched them against the requirements of each job. And the ads that were candidate-centric produced just under 3 times as many suitable candidates as the other ads. That study was done in 2014. And like I said, I'll send you a link to that, or I'll post a link in the chat section once I'm done. I'm now just going to sort of finish off by showing you some examples of some openings to job ads that produce fantastic responses. The first one I'm showing was from a client of mine, a recruitment agency called Data Science Talent. And the opening line to the ad was, "Have you ever been on a train journey when no one ever gets off the train?" This is an opening to a job ad that we call a pattern disruptor. It's something that nobody is expecting to read at the top of a job ad or at the top of an email about a job, and that it would intrigue people to want to keep reading to see what it meant. What it went on to sell was the fact that this company didn't lose people. So all of the people that joined the data science department of this large corporate over the last, I think it was the last 7 years, and it was 9 people, every single one of them was still working there. And the tone of the ad was built around Harry Potter, because it was felt that that cultural reference would work with this particular nerdy group of potential candidates, and it worked. Here's an ad that I ran a few years ago. It was for a salesperson to sell stationery. It was a sort of a key account, major account role, and the opening line was, "Here's proof that you're not earning what you're worth." The thinking being that most salespeople are motivated by the prospect of earning more money. And we went on to make the case that if they're already doing the job well, they're probably not being paid enough. and we itemized how they would get paid more by doing the same job with my particular client. And lo and behold, it produced, I remember, 4 candidates that all made the shortlist from a total response, I think, of around 50. Here's an ad that a client of mine ran for a part-time CFO role working for Mind, the mental health charity. For every 6 people who apply for this job, 1 will experience a mental health problem this week. It could be you, it might be me. And essentially the angle there, because it was a part-time role, it was quite a senior role, we figured that probably the kind of person we were looking for might be semi-retired, probably didn't need as much money as they might have needed 10, 15, 20 years ago, and that they would probably be as drawn to the kind of altruistic elements of the hiring company, in this case Mind, than any particular aspect of the job. And again, it worked. And here's probably the most controversial example, an ad that was for a marketing manager working for the German equivalent of Ann Summers, which is a sex products company. And the ad started with, "Are you comfortable with your sexuality?" We started the ad this way because the client's previous attempts at hiring a marketing manager for this job kept hitting a cul-de-sac because too many candidates were decided halfway through the process that they weren't altogether comfortable telling people that they sold sex products for a living when they were at barbecues and people asked them what they did, what their job was. So we felt that it was something that we had to get out of the way right from the get-go. So we made it all about sex. We went on to argue that if you're a good marketer, you need to get past people's taboos, hang-ups they might have about the subject. And again, it worked. So, in summary, there are 2 types of candidate. There are those people that need another job, who probably don't need as much selling done to them as the other category, which are people who want a better job or might be open to the prospect of getting a better job. Those people do occasionally look at job ads, sometimes deliberately. They'll go to Google and type in marketing manager Milton Keynes 50K just to see what's out there. And if your ad stands out from all of the others, they're more likely to A, notice it, B, click it, and C, read it, and D, potentially respond. But whatever you do, you're going to have to sell the job if you want to attract better people. And the best, most consistent way of selling a job to anyone is to talk about that job in terms that mean something to them rather than in terms that mean something to the hiring company. So to answer the question, what's in it for the candidate, not what's in it for the company. That's it. Thank you, guys. Over to you. Silence. Anyone have any questions? Yeah.
Yeah, I believe so. Is that working? Yeah. One quick question: was the PowerPoint targeted towards an audience like my age, which is like 18-ish? Because there's a lot of things in there, like memes and stuff. It's surprising to see them there, to be honest.
Why? Because I'm so old. And you don't.
No. It's that in a professional PowerPoint. I was surprised to see them. I was like, wow, okay.
Okay, right. Yes, it was deliberate because so it was a very pan-European audience. The source, and most of them were sources working for corporates as opposed to agencies. Probably it was about a 70-30 split, maybe 80-20. And sources in the internet age tend to be a little bit nerdier than most typical recruiters, and spend a lot of time online. So yeah, that was deliberate. It was deliberate.
Okay. It seems like that the continuous theme that's been happening through this is not only targeting the audience that you want to like join, so like talking in the terms of them, but also targeting the audience, so knowing what your audience is. Is that true? Like having those two paired together?
Yeah, look, you need to. It's much easier to buy something if you know what it is you need to buy. So
Yeah.
I'm making the assumption that before a recruiter goes to market, he or she has got a fairly good thumbnail portrait of the type of person they need to attract, what kind of experience they need to have, how many years experience, what they're going to need to know, so that they can then articulate that in their marketing or in their individual messaging. Because a lot of recruitment these days is, more recruiters these days are conducting research on LinkedIn, building up a long list of potential candidates and then messaging them, okay, rather than running a job ad. Yeah. But the principles that I've outlined here are exactly the same. So if you're interrupting somebody, then there's probably potentially an even stronger argument for your message to be straight to the point, speak to them. Yeah, because we don't know if they're potentially looking for a job or not. We have to assume they're not because we're approaching them. So you have to very quickly give them a reason to want to keep reading and be curious. To think, actually, this looks like it might be an interesting job. The only difference is if you're trying to attract people via messaging, is I always advocate that you send them a 2, possibly 3-stage message. So the first message is about 100 words. It's Hi John, my name's Mitch. I'm recruiting for this position, and here's why I think you'll love this job. Benefit. Would you like to find out more? Yeah, and make it as easy for them to read it and B, respond with a positive. Most people don't respond to messages because they get a big blocks of text that are cut and paste from a job description.
Right.
And they've got little to no motivation to want to read that because they're not looking for another job. But if you open with very quickly with a benefit, do you want to halve your commute, or do you want to earn more money, or would you like to work with blah blah blah, a certain kind of technology, then it filters more people into the conversation essentially. So
is the attention span of like a huge block of text, is that with all ages that you're targeting, or is that okay? Because I would have thought it'd just been my age range that would have had a problem with that.
No, look, it's not an attention span thing either, Spencer. Yeah. Yeah, it's Spencer. It's not an attention span thing. It's a reason to read thing. Why would I read that? The types of people that would read a big block of text that just talks about the responsibilities and the requirements of a job are people that need another job to see if they might be suitable. But those people are easy to find. Because for obvious reasons. And often the difference between a successful recruitment campaign and one that's not successful is often the difference between generating getting 40 job applications and getting 45. It's the 5 that are the more discerning. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So every single applicant is really, really important, because that could be actually an applicant you want.
Yeah. Look, recruitment advertising is far more limiting in terms of how creative you can be compared to pretty much most other forms of advertising. But we have one factor that's massively in our favor that doesn't favor all those others, because they have to generate hundreds, if not thousands, of customers, whereas a recruitment ad only has to find one customer.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So it's all about small margins. If you say the right things in the right way to the right people, more of those right people will put their hand up and say, actually, I'd like to find out more. And you only need one person to fill a job. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that was what you mentioned about before, about the nerdy kind of like Harry Potter like theme that you had going on there before.
In that particular ad, yeah, but we were talking to data scientists. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you were looking for a data scientist, you do that type of thing. Yeah.
Tone of voice, the type of language you use, and any cultural references, it has to be appropriate to that particular audience. So, that wouldn't have been as viable had we been speaking to, I don't know, salespeople, let's say. Yeah.
Yeah. Because it wouldn't be all nerdy.
Potentially. Yeah, potentially.
Stereotypically, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a
Yeah,
box
that-
type, but yeah.
That's great.
Thanks, Spencer.
It's no bother.
Hello, Dan.
Hello. Right. So in the past, we've had job adverts that are a little bit as you described as maybe a bad job advert. But at the time, we were looking for maybe a diverse set of candidates. And I had a female developer that I used to work with read over the advert as well.
Yeah.
And she said, "Oh no, it sounds all right." I've read something previously where the language could influence whether somebody applies or doesn't apply. As you kind of already gone over.
Yeah.
So how can you try and be more, I don't know, open to everybody to apply in
Okay.
the advert and attract hopefully a more diverse workforce as well?
Okay, right. It's a really good question, and it has become something of a theme over the last year or so, in particular. Right, I'm trying to work out how to give you the short version. I can only speak to gender. Looking for gender parity. So if you want to attract more women to jobs that don't traditionally attract females, then you can affect the responses you're likely to get from females by massaging the type of language. I'm going to also, there's a link that I can share with you, Dan. I'll share it with everybody at the end. But it's a gender decoder, and essentially allows people to cut and paste their content into this tool, and it will tell you whether the content is more male or female biased. Okay.
Yeah, that'd be really interesting.
Yeah, that's so. To give you a simple example, studies have been done, and the results show that females are more likely to respond to content or job ads that are not loaded with words that are typically associated with males. So I'll give you an example. Rather than saying somebody needs to have strong management skills, which is very masculine, you would ask for somebody with collaborative management skills. That change would statistically be more likely to appeal to a female reader than a male reader, if that's what your intent is.
Right.
The other thing to note with female or making your job ads more gender neutral is that, and this was a study done by Hewlett Packard just a few years ago, apparently men will apply to any job where they believe they have 60% of the stated requirements, whereas females will predominantly only respond if they think they have 100%. So not loading your job ad with loads of requirements will also help.
I've read that as well. So we've written it something like, we use AWS, but if you've used, Azure or Google, then that's okay too, or something along those lines.
Yeah, well, the tool that I'm going to send you is produced by somebody called Kat Matfield. Does that name ring any bells? Have you come across that before?
I haven't. No.
No, I'll send it to you. The tool allows you to do what I've just described, but also that if at the bottom of the page there's a link that will take you to the study, which is it's a little bit academic as far as reading material is concerned, but the study is detailed there. And if you scroll to the end of the study, they then give you a list of male and female words to either avoid or use more of if you're looking for a more nuanced or balanced response to your job ads.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mitch.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Hi, Mitch.
Hi, Seth.
All right. I just wanted to ask to what extent you think that job ads should be used to what extent, if any, I guess, as a screening tool as well as an attraction tool.
Okay. Yeah, look, I've seen loads of job ads do that. Yeah. Some justifiably, others far less so. I think it's a huge mistake to try, and by screening, do you mean to set the reader some kind of task that they've got to perform in order to make their application?
No, more so in terms of, I guess, criteria they have to meet in order to apply.
All right. Well, look, all job ads have to have a section that tells the reader what they're going to need to have to qualify to do the job. Yeah.
But would you recommend, I mean, not doing that overtly, just making that kind of obvious by the description of what the job involves? Is that preferable?
Yeah. Look, it's a good question. And as always, the answer is nuanced. So apologies, it's going to take a little bit longer to answer. Again, it comes back to how big is the potential target audience for this particular job. If it's huge, so if it's a relatively low level role, it's an admin role, it's a junior role of some description, and you feel that there's going to be lots and lots of those people available, either in jobs they hate or in between jobs, then you can be very specific. Yeah. But again, you've experienced this probably yourself. Lots and lots of people complain that their job ads receive too many applications from people that are not suitable. Yeah. And I would contest that that's mostly caused by people not reading the ad. Yeah. Because it's it's 800 words of a job description. Basically, it's been cut and pasted across to try and behave like a job ad, but it's not actually advertising anything. It's just giving details of a job. And most people are just not going to read that. So yeah, it's you've got to be specific about what are the minimum requirements. The big mistake that most job ads make is they put every single thing that they would like, ideally. Yeah. And actually that ends up turning off people who could very well do the job really well. But when it says things like you'll ideally also have, then in their minds they're thinking, okay, that's what they're really looking for, and I don't have those ideally have extras. And so they end up not applying, which sometimes is a tragedy because they could have been the right candidate. So I think if it's a job that's traditionally difficult to fill, and you've used the right job title and you've talked about the job in the right terms that only those types of people would really understand, you probably don't need to go into too much lengths about what they're going to need to qualify. Yeah,
and any sort of supplementary experience like the nice to haves, it may be better just to not really mention that.
Well, that's something I think for you and or the hiring manager to do privately when looking at applications. And if you're getting more than you thought you'd get, and you're getting a lot of good people, then you can use that criteria to create your shortlist from the long list. But to start chucking out those demands right at the front end or at the top of the funnel, I think is madness, because it just creates more words and the more words there are, the less inclined people are to read them. It can be off-putting for the right people. But most ads are going to have to make some reference to the minimum qualifications they're going to have. And that should always come near the end of the ad, nowhere near the top. The top half of all job ads or messages about jobs should all be about the candidate. Yeah. Great. Use the word you a lot. Sense. Yeah. You'll be doing this, you'll benefit from this, you'll learn how to, you'll get better at. That kind of language that paints a picture of, actually, this job sounds like it might be better than the one that I'm doing. Then you can get into the tasks, and then you can get into the requirements.
Right. No, that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, Mitch.
Hello, Matt.
You're right. I was just going to say very quickly, just before I asked my question, it was just the stuff that Dan was saying, because I work for a company called Scott Logic, so it's another sort of northeast tech company. One thing that we did, Dan, we managed to get a few free trials of again, it's on the lines of what Mitch was talking about, Texio. Which is software that kind of looks at sort of gender neutral language. We managed to run a few of our adverts through that on free trials, like different people signing up. So it's just another kind of tool to look at. Costs an absolute fortune to subscribe to it, if I remember. So yeah, we haven't got a license, but certainly, the stuff that you were mentioning in terms of, sort of adverts. So like our developer advert, we really stripped it back. It used to be a bit of a cut and paste a job description, to be honest. When I sort of joined the company, it was like that anyway. Whereas now, actually, the advert doesn't really ask very much for what devs have in terms of skills. Again, coming down to sort of technologies can be learned if someone's done something similar. So, absolutely, definitely in terms of the dev adverts, just stripping out as much as you can, like what you want from that person, because you got a female dev and she's only she's learned Java, and you know what I mean. You know what I'm getting at.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
And developers are probably the toughest crowd out there, the toughest candidate crowd out there.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I don't do much in the way of sort of writing job adverts these days, because most of it with tech, it is kind of going out and trying to persuade people to apply. So I guess the stuff that you were touching on, more relevant in terms of I guess LinkedIn messaging, some things to think about there. No, my question was going to be, so I was always kind of some really interesting approaches, some of the examples that you shared there. I've always been kind of a bit in the mindset of rightly or wrongly, I've always been big on, we must appeal to candidates, benefits, this is what we can offer you, without trying to, too much of all the spiel about, this is the company and our history and blah, blah, blah. This is what we want. But in terms of like the sort of start of a job advert, I've always been kind of quite big on like SEO for like Google and jobs and stuff like that. How trying to get your job to feature higher on job boards, keyword searching and stuff. How do you balance off that kind of creative approach that you're taking there with that side of things?
No, it's a good question. It's a very good question. First of all, the examples I showed you, certainly 3 of the 4 were quite creative, and took a little bit of sort of creative sort of time spent thinking, how can we what metaphor can we use to try and get this benefit across? Not everyone can do that or do it quickly, including me, by the way. And I've written hundreds of job ads, both for myself and for clients. So don't get too obsessed with the whole creative angle or making job ads look sexy. If you're stuck for a way of opening a job ad, just start it with, we think you'll love this job because, and then put whatever you think is the 1, 2, or 3 main selling points of that job. You'll learn a lot more about X, Y, and Z. You'll blah blah blah, and you'll get blah blah blah. And that will hook more people, because they'll instantly see a reason to want to keep reading. I know, both from my own experience and from the 700 or so recruiters that have passed through our copywriting for recruiter training course, is that if you start an ad by talking directly to the reader, and an obvious way of doing that is to ask them a question, because it subconsciously engages them, because they'll subconsciously answer the question and invariably keep reading to find out if there is an answer. But if you make it about them, they're far more likely to read, be it an ad or an email or a message or a status update. Now, the other thing, the SEO thing, job boards for many, many years now have been going out to recruitment agencies and selling the spiel about, you've got to cram your job ad with the job title 5, 6, 7, 8 times in order to continually increase your chances of being found on any keyword searches that the candidate will do from that job board. So again, most people, when they're having a look to see what might be out there, the 3 most common things they'll search on are the job title, the location, and the salary. Those are the big 3. And the job boards have been advising agencies to keep repeating the job title, because in the ad, because it's got more chance of getting found within what essentially is their own gated community, because it's not SEO for Google, it's SEO for their particular algorithm that's driving that. The problem with doing that is it makes the reading of the ad clunky. But if you write a good job ad that speaks to the needs of the target candidate, you can get away with repeating the job title 3 or 4 times, which will help get it ranked on that particular job board. But let me just explain. Job boards do that deliberately because it benefits them. It doesn't benefit you, the recruiter,
Right.
because it renders most job postings unreadable because they're clunky. In fact, I've just reminded, I'm going to send you another link to another blog where I take the piss out of that whole practice of loading job ads with the job title. I think the job boards, because basically what it does, it helps their SEO. So anyone that starts their job search from Google, marketing manager Milton Keynes 50K, it increases the chances of their job board appearing on the first page for that particular job. Yeah, because the more jobs that contain the words marketing manager Milton Keynes, means that they're more likely to be found. So it's a bit self-serving. A more controversial opinion would be that it's not in the job board's best interest for recruiters to fill their jobs first time out either.
Yeah.
But I've got no way of proving that. But yeah, there is some logic to it.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me.
The SEO thing is only relevant if you're driving traffic to your own website.
Yeah.
So I would argue that, and I do this myself. As you may know, I write quite a lot of blogs, but I've got a separate blog for the training website where it's just all about SEO. So I just keep using the word job advert, job description lots and lots of times, just so it gets ranked, so people are more likely to click on it and find the website. So I think if you want to drive candidates to your agency website, you probably need to have some job ads that are SEO compliant, and maybe there's an argument for them to be there all the time. So they're ads that are indicative of the types of job ads that you fill. But look, I'm no SEO expert. You're going to have to talk to someone who knows a lot more about that than me. But where I'm coming from is making the content readable, because the problem with most job ads is people don't read them because they're unreadable.
Yeah.
That's the job descriptions. And
yeah.
the candidate is only going to be motivated to read the job description after they've made the decision that this might be an interesting job. I'm never going to make that decision from reading the job spec. So
yeah, no, absolutely
the
not.
job spec needs to be introduced to the candidate a little bit later, not right at the top of the funnel, but a little bit further into the funnel. So once they've expressed some interest.
I must admit, I always laugh at the civil service type job ads.
Yeah.
You can never understand what a job is.
Yeah,
when you look it up, and then it's just I can never read to the end of one of their ads.
Yeah, that's a whole kind of subculture over there. I can't even begin to work out why they do that. But yeah, I think possibly the types of candidates they're trying to speak to are a bit different and think a bit different, perhaps. I don't know, but it certainly wouldn't work if they're trying to attract people from the private sector, for sure.
Yeah, definitely not. Cool. Thank you.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure the slides on their own are going to make much sense because there's a whole load of narrative built around them. But look, if people want copies of them, I've got no problem with that at all. Yeah, so look, if you want them, I think Tom has got a copy actually. So yeah. And the other thing, look, I'll send you an email with the links. Can you send them on to everyone else for me? I've got 1, 2, 3. I've got 4 different links that will give them more information about some of the topics that came up in the questions. Okay. All right, guys. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Mitch.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.